Hi everyone, I'm your host Neha and you're tuned into Durian Dreaming, the show that brings you extraordinary stories from seemingly ordinary experiences in Indonesia's fast-paced market. Let's dive into today's conversation with another inspiring guest. Hi everyone, welcome to the new episode of Durian Dreaming. Today we are joined by Mohammad Alapsi. He's the CPTO with a tech company called Flip. It is one of Indonesia's fintech companies, along with as an advisor and an investor to some of the startup companies across Southeast Asia. So, from building products to scaling teams, he has seen it firsthand how AI, technology, and innovation are transforming businesses across Southeast Asia. In this episode, we'll talk about startups, we'll talk about leadership, we'll talk about AI, and what it really takes to build a long lasting company in the tech world. Hi, Mohammed. Welcome to our podcast.
Hi Neha, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure, Mohammed. So, Mohammed, tell us about your career journey.
Sure. So I started my career as a junior engineer at a startup that got acquired by Yahoo. Then spent about 10 years at Amazon as one of the early engineers in Amazon Web Services, building some of their key products like EC2, Step Function, and Mechanical Turk. I was also one of the founding members of some of Amazon's new businesses at the time, like the advertising business and the B2B marketplace business called Amazon Business.
Hmm.
After 10 years at Amazon, I wanted to do something different. I thought of joining a startup and living abroad. Had no idea that they'll take me to Southeast Asia, but it's been a great journey. So
Actually, that's what
then
I wanted to ask because you have worked in Europe, you
yeah,
have worked in US. So why would someone leave established markets like US and Europe and move to Indonesia to build something here?
I I think it's quite noticeable to see that there is a lot of energy in the region. I mean, it's a
Hmm.
very young population, fast-growing economies.
Hmm.
You just have to go in the streets of Jakarta to see see all of that energy and just, sort of feel it. And there's a very strong sense of hunger in the startup scene as well, which I think is quite exciting and presents a lot of opportunity.
Hmm. So before Flip, you were working with a company called Fast, right?
Right.
Tell us something about that.
So HiFast is a house of brands. They own cosmetics and beauty brands that operate predominantly in Indonesia. I was there as the CPTO, where I built software products and services to enable our brands to understand the customers better and to increase their sales and revenue.
And what was the turning point where you felt like I need to move to the tech world and you joined Flip?
I've been there for a bit over 4 years, and like I felt that I can lead the team and the business in a much better place than when I first joined. Uh,
Hmm.
and at that point, I was open to taking a look at potential other opportunities. And I
Hmm.
thought Flip, which I have invested in back in 2020,
Hmm.
is in a place where I can work with them on taking the business to the next level, and thought that that would be a very interesting challenge.
Right. Mohammed, you have worked with a lot of startups, right? You've seen them up close. So, what are the hardest realities of building a startup here in Indonesia, which only the founders can truly understand after they start operating it?
Yeah, I mean it's a fantastic question, and I think being a founder is quite challenging because your staff depend on a lot of the decisions that you make to for the business to succeed, and then for them to succeed, and for the business to grow
Hmm.
and flourish. Your investors depend on you to making sure that you're executing well, you're making the right decisions on the strategy side, on the ops side, on the people side. Um, and you don't really have a very long period of time per se. So there's that. I think the founders who tend to be very successful are the ones that are able to experiment quickly and cheaply. And once they get to a good deal of traction and find something that has very good signals, so be able to double down on that. But it doesn't get easier because as the business grows, there are bigger targets, bigger objectives, and it's definitely a great personal growth journey. But it's not for the faint-hearted, if I may say.
Right. Indonesia's fintech space has fierce competition. It has attracted billions of dollars, but it's also crowded. So tell me, how did Flip win in one of the toughest fintech markets in Asia? Or
Yeah.
what is it that Flip understood better about Indonesia that competitors still struggle to?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Flip was founded by three college students back in 2015,
Mm.
and what they were trying to solve is a problem that they were facing themselves, which I think that sort of empathy towards the need of the average Indonesian was a very key criteria for Flip to succeed.
Hmm.
So the problem was at the time is that anytime you want to transfer money to a friend, to a relative, no matter how small or how big that amount of money is, you'll need to pay a relatively sizable fee for the average Indonesian. So these three co-founders, Ari, Lukman, and Anja, came up with an innovative solution to be able to allow people to transfer money with exceptionally small fees while making money from those transactions as well. And I think, that sort of mindset of how do I, number one, try to resonate with the problems of the average Indonesian, a problem that is experienced at a massive scale, and then how to build solutions that will generate value both for our customers as well as for the business is something that is very well ingrained in the culture of Flip. And I think that's one of the key reasons why not only Flip has survived for the last 10 years, but it's been uh, uh, growing and thriving as well.
Hmm. Because in fintech, trust is the product, right?
Absolutely.
And Indonesia is a very cash-driven market. So, how do you build trust at scale in Indonesia amongst the users where their first choice is cash?
Right, right. So I completely agree that I think cash is still a dominant method of payment and transfer money. But at the same time, we do see a growing trend where especially in large pockets of population like the Jakarta region and maybe some of the other big cities, where payment methods like QRIS are becoming more and more popular. And with the younger population, getting into the workforce and starting to make money their own, they're able to adopt some of the advanced or the recently developed technologies in that space. But to tap into the wider market, I think it's very critical, not just for Flip, but for any startup in Indonesia, to make sure that the customer experience is pretty easy to follow. Um, it becomes a lot easier for you to sort of onboard folks that maybe have not tried your product before or haven't tried a Fintech product at
Mhm.
all in the past and educate them on how to use it and the value that they will get out of it. And if that's cracked, then I think all of the metrics that you'll see in your customer acquisition and engagement funnels will definitely go.
Hmm. I read somewhere that Flip has a very unique tech culture. So,
Right.
how do you intentionally build that kind of tech culture, given that's local talent, and not just another fast scaling startup story?
Yeah. So the culture that I see and I see it consistently, not just in my teams, the technology teams, but across the board, is that we are a company of owners. So we're not there just to go and execute a task. We're there to ask the right questions, understand why the problems that we're trying to solve are valuable problems to solve. They're the right problems to solve at the moment. And I think that sort of mindset not only empowers our staff to think as owners, but also to operate as owners, which I think gets us close to what the customers need and allow us to go and execute a lot faster than what the competition can possibly do.
And what's your honest assessment of Indonesia's tech talent? Do you think the tech talent here is underrated?
I think there's definitely a big and growing pool of talent. I think, the last 10 years with the rise of some of the flagship technology companies like Tokopedia, Traveloka, Bukalapak, Gojek,
Hmm.
plus
Hmm.
some of the regional tech companies that have a sizable presence in Indonesia, like Shopee and Grab, have really, played a critical role in growing and maturing the tech pool in Indonesia. I think we're still a few years behind some of the more mature markets like China, India, and of course the US. But I
Hmm.
think, Indonesia has gone a long way in terms of developing that ecosystem, where talent plays obviously very critical.
Hmm. So, if someone wanted to land a role today at Flip, what would genuinely catch your attention?
Um, we're still a relatively young company. We're very fast growing. We're quite hungry ourselves, and I think, somebody who has that similar sense of hunger
Hmm.
to build great products, achieve great things is from a culture standpoint would fit exceptionally well at Flip. So that's maybe, one of the things that we look for. Folks who have the ability to grow and learn quickly can do quite well at Flip.
Okay.
Because as we grow and as we add more products, more features, and as we grow our customer base, we're going to face different types of problems or similar problems, but at a much larger scale.
Hmm.
So we're going through that process ourselves, and uh, um, to be somebody that can identify and solve problems and be able to grow out of them is somebody that can definitely be successful in that environment.
Hmm. So, you mentioned about that potential candidate should have that hunger or the drive within himself. Uh, So that's one part. And then there is a pace of the country itself.
Right.
So, do you think that Indonesia's tech talent should stay and build locally here or gain experience abroad first and then come back?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I don't know if it's a size fit all type of situation. So I think at the individual level, the person should try to look for their own local maxima, where from all the opportunities that I have available to
Hmm.
me, which opportunity will allow me to build my skill set, grow my career, make me a more valuable professional in the marketplace. And if they can get that outside of Indonesia, that's great. If they can find that within Indonesia, I think that is great too.
How far behind is Indonesia in terms of technology and AI readiness?
So I would say it depends on which technology. So for example, when it comes to manufacturing chips, I think for example within Southeast Asia, Malaysia stands out due to a number of reasons. I mean, historically speaking, they had any number of factories and a lot of experience in building uh, the low end the low end chips that coupled with infrastructure with the right laws and regulations that encourage those type of investments, plus the talent pool that was growing in the past, 2, 3, 4 decades, kind of allowed but Malaysia to be a bit more dominant in that space. Singapore has always been a hub for investments within Southeast Asia due to a variety of reasons. But Singapore itself as a market is relatively small. So what a lot of the investments would end up doing is that the investments would come to Singapore. But if it is a regional play, then definitely some of the larger countries in Southeast Asia, like Indonesia, would take a big piece of that investment.
Hmm.
Um, but I think, for Indonesia to be able to track more of these investments, I think uh, um, the environment that would allow investors to move quickly, to feel more confident that their investments would go a long way, are some of the things that basically have to happen in order for Indonesia to be more competitive. But generally speaking, in the AI space, I would argue that actually Southeast Asia in general is behind compared to some of the countries like particularly China and the US.
Hmm. How big is the AI ecosystem in Indonesia?
Um, not that big, to be honest. I think there's you know three categories of, I would say, maybe AI related investments. Number one is going to be in the hardware space, which countries like the US, Taiwan, China are doing quite well in. The second is on building the machine learning models or building the AI models, particularly on the large language models, and these models are predominantly coming out of the US and to a lesser extent China. And I would argue everybody else in the world is just trying to play catch up, or they're consuming these models. And the third layer of innovation is startups or solutions that are using these LLMs to solve business problems. And I think in Southeast Asia, as well as in particular Indonesia, there is a good number of startups that are growing that are solving problems using AI, but they're more of the third category of businesses rather than the first or the second.
Will Indonesia create its own AI champions?
I think the ones from the third category, yes. I have seen a good number of startups that are successfully able to solve problems a lot more efficiently using AI. I have three startups in my portfolio actually that are Southeast Asia based, but they're able to sell their AI solutions not just in Southeast Asia, but also in some of the mature markets like the US and Europe.
Mm.
Um, you know, there are, some of the examples like Hupo, which is a startup that built a solution to train your staff, particularly staff that work in sales, using AI, give them recommendations how to improve their performance, and they have a lot of clients in the US. The second is Accelerate, which is competing with traditional, very expensive, slow consulting practice that cost clients a lot of money to be able to figure out what are some of the risks that an organization has. From a people standpoint, they can do that very effectively with AI, a much faster period at a much cheaper cost. And then finally, Code.ai, which allows companies to recruit and hire very quickly, very efficiently, which obviously the faster you can onboard the right people to your team, the faster your time to market is. And all these startups are Southeast Asia based, and all of them have been quite successful, not just in Southeast Asia, but across other markets as well.
So, Southeast Asia startup funding, it dropped very fast post peak pandemic era. So
Right.
many startups had their layoffs, restructuring, they relooked at the profitability model. So, do you think the party is over? And now what?
Yeah, it is a great question. I think it is a situation that is not just present in Southeast Asia, but in most global markets, whether it is in the US or Europe, it's is a very similar story. 2023 and after, due to a number of macro factors, um, that includes most notably the increase of interest rates by 10 15 folds, particularly from the Fed Reserve in the US. The cost of money became much higher than what it was in 2020 2021, and that sort of changed the perception from potential investors and where they would deploy their money. And naturally, a less portion of an institutional investor's money started going to um, some of the high risk, high growth type of assets like startups. Um, I am of the opinion, and I could be wrong, so take what I say with a grain of salt. I'm of the opinion that um, this is a cycle. We have seen this cycle after the dot-com bust. We've seen this cycle in 2008 and 2009. Obviously, I don't know how long it will take. It all depends also on a number of global factors. But what we know as senior operators and as founders that we need to focus on what we can control, and what we can control is building our businesses and organizations to be resilient and self-reliant, such that if we're able to raise money, that's great. We'll be able to grow faster. But if we're not, then that shouldn't be a bottleneck or a hurdle for us to build a great business.
Hmm. I'm going to dwell a bit more because you touched upon that for the startups to become more enduring companies over the next decade, they need to be self-reliant. So, what mindset change do Indonesian founders need to make if they want to build long-lasting companies?
Yeah, when the cost of money was low, it was quite easy to build a business that gets a lot of traction or has a lot of traction by simply not making money, right? So, um, the average Indonesian or the average customer for that matter, regardless where they're from, if you're going to give them a product or a service at a cheaper cost, they will take it. But that doesn't mean that you're building a sustainable business. So the challenge is from the get-go how to build a business that solves real world problems, that creates value for your customer while allowing you to make money. And that means that your uh, unit economics have to be positive, your gross margins have to be quite big and sizable while you're going after a larger market or a sizable enough market. Um, and I think that means that your problem statement as a founder or a senior operator becomes a bit more complex. But to be honest, that's how it should have been in the first place. So there is some sort of a blessing in disguise that um, the macroeconomic headwinds of the last 2 to 3 years sort of forced startups and senior operators to correct and to do things the right way, in my opinion.
So, do VCs also need to rethink how they fund and mentor startups in Southeast Asia?
I think, and I would argue that the same sort of correction that you're seeing in startups, we have seen in VCs as well. So the way that they evaluate startups, the way that they value startups, and the nature of the businesses that they will invest in has actually changed. And I've seen VCs where they were solely focused on, for example, Southeast Asia, that they're now expanding to, for example, Southeast Asia or India, or Southeast Asia plus some of the APAC countries that are more developed, just to diversify risk or to go after markets where there's a larger ticket size, or as a move to allow or to give an opportunity to their portfolio companies to expand to markets where they can make a higher ARPU, make a higher average revenue per user. Some of the VCs started to invest more in non-tech startups. Some VCs changed to what they perceive as a good startup, from looking at valuations based off of GMV to valuations based off of revenue or based off of net revenue. So I think we've seen a lot of that in corrections in the VC space, which in my opinion has been a good correction as well.
Did the e-fishery scandal damage the trust in Indonesian tech?
It's a great question, and to be honest, I don't know for sure. But just purely looking at that story, I have two reactions. Number one, it's not a great story. And definitely when you read it, you start to
Mm,
question whether there's enough governance within the ecosystem to prevent something like this from happening.
mm,
On the flip side, I mean, this is a story that we've seen in other markets as well. I mean, I've seen this startups in more mature markets like Singapore or the US, where the founders have done something not exactly the same, but something that's quite similar that resulted in both the investors as well as the employees ending up being on the bad side of it. So it's not really unheard of. I would argue, but it's definitely not a great story um, to highlight, especially at a time when it is quite challenging to raise money as a startup in the first place.
Can Indonesia become a tech power giant without stronger support from the government?
Um, I am hopeful, but I at the same time I think the ecosystem cannot live independently of the regulations that are imposed on the market. So I mean, obviously, there is a lot of tools from that side of things where it will definitely help the ecosystem to thrive. I believe that the Indonesian government has done um, in the past few years a good number of steps to sort of encourage that growth, and I believe that there's possibly more opportunity um, for such steps that will allow startups and investments to move a bit faster and at the same time without sacrificing the protection of consumers and the market in general.
Which sector will create Indonesia's next giant?
To be honest, I don't know to be exact. I think there's a number of sectors that have very good potential from um, basically mining, banking, um, to renewable energy and tech. I think there is a lot of opportunity there, but to try to pin it down to a specific industry, I'm not sure that I have that context, to be honest.
You're an advisor to the startups, you have invested in startups. Now you're a part of one of the biggest fintechs in Indonesia. So, what's your best career advice to Gen Z in tech?
My biggest advice is your first couple of jobs are going to set the tone of how quickly you grow. Um, you know, as building a business is a team sport, and the people that you work with on a day-to-day basis gonna play a critical role in helping you learn quickly the type of skill set that you'll be able to pick up, the type of mindset that you'll be able to develop, and the values that you'll be able to hone. And all of these things are going to be very, very critical tools in your shed that are going to help you determine how quickly you're going to grow in your career and how successful you're going to be. So invest in yourself, but for the future and not necessarily for the now. Um, and treat yourself as basically as a startup. Keep evaluating where you're doing well, what you need to improve on, and be, aggressive and hungry in trying to find what you need to do to go to the next level. And I think if you do that, and if you do that consistently, hopefully you'll be in a good place.
Great. One last question. Can Indonesia produce globally a very well-respected tech company?
I think so, yeah. And um, I would argue, big companies like Gojek and Traveloka that do have presence
Mhm.
outside of Indonesia. Um, we have startups or tech companies like Tokopedia that got acquired by one of the largest global tech companies in the globe. Um, and the tech talent or the talent in general in Indonesia played a critical role in the success of some of the large and regional companies like Grab and Shopee that are uh, listed in the New York Stock Exchange. So I think we've definitely made very good progress, and I won't be surprised in the coming few years if we see more and more of these successes.
Great. Thank you so much, Mohammed, to be with us on the podcast. Very insightful conversation and very promising conversation. Like it's very encouraging conversation that there's a huge talent which has the drive and the hunger. Indonesia can be the next big tech giant. And one should not be dissuaded by the e-fishery scandal. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Neha. It is always great to catch up with you and to have these very wonderful and insightful conversations. And thank you so much for having me.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Durian Dreaming. I hope today's discussion sparked some new ideas for you. Don't forget to subscribe, share your thoughts, and stay tuned for more exciting stories. Until next time, keep dreaming big.